Hello, welcome to AMWAS. Thank you for the people who's joining. We are now live on social media. We are live streaming this Tabadul webinar on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on YouTube. So we will start. For those who don't know much about AMWAS, we are a non-profit community-based initiative, and it's led by Revolve. Revolve is a communications agency. We are working from Brussels, Barcelona, and Vienna. Today, we are actually live streaming from Barcelona. And my name is Patricia Carbonell. I'm coordinating here the activities of Revolve from Barcelona, delving into projects that are actually working for sustainable development. The AMWAS Alliance, it's an initiative that is trying to bring together communications and media professionals, businesses, researchers, and policymakers from both shores of the Mediterranean region. And our main goal is to mobilize people to inspire action using more reliable and impactful communication techniques about the water challenges that we face in the region. This year, we launched the AMWAS Manifesto. It's translated in 5 languages, and it's aiming to gather support to protect and restore water ecosystems. With your support as well, we will be able to amplify this message to argument the urgency of protecting and valuing water. And you can actually share any comments or questions that you might have in the social media chats. And also, we will be sharing the link to the manifesto in case you want to sign it today. This will also help us to gather more support and be stronger when communicating and trying to influence policy and businesses. So my colleagues, we will be sharing the links on social. We all know that the Mediterranean has been always a place to exchange culture, knowledge, and trade. And today we are celebrating this exchange through Tabadul, which is actually the meaning in Arabic, exchanges. And before I give the floor to the speakers of today, I would like to share our little contribution to the Mediterranean Day, which was celebrated yesterday. And today we are honored to share what our community thinks about what the Mediterranean means for them, for us. So let's play the video before we start with Tabadul's session today.
¿O has de una pregunta o ya lo tallarás? ¿Puedo decirlo, o sea, empezar solo con la palabra y después...? Pero hazme la pregunta.
Empiezo.
El Mediterráneo para mí es hogar.
اليارامي.
البحر الأبيض بالنسبة لي هو الذكريات.
Riqueza es verano.
La chaleur.
Mare Nostrum.
Fusion.
Buena vida.
Es una región de contrastes.
La Méditerranée, pour moi, c'est les légumes qui sont pleins de couleurs, pleins de saveurs et qu'on cuisine à l'huile d'olive.
Gli aromi che si sprigionano dal sole, delle piante, del cibo, delle città, delle strade assolate.
La riquesa cultural, gastronòmica, ambiental, paisatgística.
Contrastes en la naturaleza, en la gente, en el arte, en la cultura, en todo.
Es vivir en la calle, con buen clima, socializar, relacionarte con los demás.
وهو كل وقت قضيته مع صحابي لحد ما الشمس غابت في المكان.
Son playas, es ambiente cálido, es gente tranquilla, disfrutando.
Perché come ai tempi dell'antica Roma rappresenta il melting pot di culture che collaborano tra di loro per arrivare a un bene comune.
La chaleur de la vie et la chaleur des gens et la chaleur de toutes les journées au soleil.
It's a melting pot of different cultures.
Es el lugar donde me siento en casa. Da igual en qué punto de la región esté, siempre hay un olor o un sabor, un sonido que me hace sentir muy en casa.
I hope you liked it. Now is your time to let us know what the Mediterranean means for you. You can use any social media at AMWAS Alliance, #Tabadul, #Mediterranean Day. You can use any of these hashtags to actually amplify this message. So let's jump into today's session, which aims to explain the basic interconnections between water, energy, food, and ecosystems. This is the so-called WEFE Nexus. It's being used a lot in research and in policy, but I think it's time for everyone to understand what this means, to set the context and to give some different perspectives around this topic, set some examples, also share some examples on how to embed this approach into journalistic reporting, which is our main mission when covering climate change. So without more hesitation, it's a pleasure to give the floor to Jihed Granen. He's working on communications for nature and sustainable development at UNEP-MAP. Hello, Jihed.
Hi. Hi, Patricia.
Welcome.
Very warm.
Welcome.
Thank you. Very warm welcome to everyone joining us today. And it's a privilege and an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So feel free to share your screen and give us some context into the work you are doing on protecting marine and coastal ecosystems.
Okay. Thank you. So as I said, it's a good day today because it's we are celebrating the day or the day of the Mediterranean. So I'd like to say it. I'd like to say Sabah al-Khair, bonjour, buongiorno, buenos dias, in all this wealth of languages that we have in the Mediterranean. Best wishes to all. And we mark this day 2 months after we celebrated Mediterranean Coast Day on the 25th of September. The Mediterranean, what a beautiful word. The moment you utter that word, images of olive trees, sumptuous beaches, and suave waves will spring to the mind of many of us. The Mediterranean continues to be a beautiful destination for millions of beachgoers and holiday makers, despite the rising pressures it has been subjected to for decades now. But beneath this postcard image lie the scars, unfortunately. Alas, the Mediterranean region is in the throes of a triple crisis of pollution, biodiversity decline, and climate change. The entire planet
I think Jihed is having some technical issues. We will try to get back to his presentation as soon as he reconnects. Unfortunately, this is what brings us online events and live stream. It's a pity that we could then hear from his insights into this. But maybe we can actually give you some context around the WEFE Nexus from our speaker, Manfred. And we try to set the context about what it means, why it should be mainstream in media. And maybe we get the basis as well, and then we go back to Jihed's perspective. Hello, Manfred.
Okay, hi. Hi. Well, I hope my connection will be better, but as you say, that's the challenge of remote meetings. Anyways, I'm happy to be here and I appreciate being invited. Let me start and jump right into it with my presentation, if you can show it. Okay, the topic is somewhat complicated to me anyways, because mainstreaming in the media, well, that's not really my field. But anyways, let's get started with the, I have to do it myself, which I do, with some words of introduction and background. And let's just start with the definition, but the definition Patricia already gave. WEFE really stands for water, energy, food, and ecosystems. And therefore, this concept really indicates commodities that are indispensable for life on our planet. And it turns out that the secure provision of each of these commodities, not only, but also in the Mediterranean, is at grave risk. Next, what does nexus really mean? Well, the term nexus means connection, link, tie between two or more items. It originates actually from the Latin nectere, to bind, And it's also used to denote a central or focal point. The word nexus or the term nexus is used in various contexts. It indicates an underlying link between cause and effect. It may denote a connected group or series. And funnily, this term is actually really old. Even though it sort of became more used now recently, it was first used in 1663. Why is a nexus approach actually needed? Now, adopting such an approach enables, in my and I think in many people's view, a more holistic analysis of causal relationships between different items or issues. It identifies and describes the interrelationships and feedbacks between different causes and effects. And the thing is, when we deal with commodities as we do in WEFE, a nexus approach integrates management and governance across sectors and scales. Well, that's a pretty complicated statement, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at. A nexus approach can also support the transition to a green economy. That's what we all strive for, I think, and enhances the sustainable utilization of commodities. Now, what actually is the WEFE Nexus? Traditionally, people have started out by looking at water, energy, and food, on water, energy, food security, in terms of what was then called the WEF Nexus. The concept of the WEF Nexus emerged in response to climate change and social changes, including population growth, globalization, economic growth, and urbanization. However, considering now the environmental externalities of resource utilization has led to an inclusion of environmental concerns, and that brings us actually through the WEFE Nexus. Now, what is the WEFE Nexus in the Mediterranean? Let's first look at the Mediterranean climate, and you know, many of you have experienced or are experiencing it. Climate change in the Mediterranean is ongoing, and it has enhanced pressure on water, energy, and food security by simultaneously actually threatening ecosystem health and integrity, as well as biodiversity. So these are pretty serious issues that we're talking about. The region is facing an unprecedented combination of changes that are likely to undermine livelihoods. In other words, it's not just quote unquote climate change, it's also environmental change. And this has been quite comprehensively addressed by a group called MEDEC, which stands for Mediterranean Experts on Environmental and Climate Change. And the first MEDEC assessment report, which you can download, I have to warn you, it's a 500 plus pages document, will give you a lot of answers on these issues. Anyways, maintaining sustainability requires and necessitates an integrated approach to resource management and environmental protection. And this is really something to keep in mind. Now, let's look at some of the impacts or effects or consequences that climate change has. Now, it leads to decreased water security, which means we have to come up with more effective water use and enhance water saving. It adds irrigation needs for agriculture. Therefore, we will have to come up with innovative and more water-saving irrigation technologies. Both of these things combine to reduce food security in the region. Therefore, we will have to come up with improved agricultural practices, something like precision agriculture, to just name one term. Now, the environmental health and integrity is threatened by climate change. Therefore, we will have, mainly because of water scarcity, therefore we'll have to make sure to provide environmental water. And one other thing, added energy needs for water production through desalination, which is practiced more and more in the Mediterranean, and for conveyance, means that we need additional conventional or additional or non-conventional water sources to make sure we ensure water security. Now, let me give you one example of water use. And as I mentioned, irrigation is an issue. Water, of course, is a central commodity within the WEFE Nexus. And in the Mediterranean, agriculture consumes up to 80% of available water. And in this somewhat complicated looking table here, I've tried to summarize some of the effects of conventional or common irrigation practices, that's to say pumped surface irrigation, versus a more WEFE smart irrigation through localized or drip irrigation. I don't have time to go through all these things, and therefore I will just look at a few things. The overexploitation of reservoirs because of irrigation will have to be exchanged by conserving water in reservoirs through the WEFE smart irrigation. For instance, another issue is the low water use efficiency of conventional irrigation, whereas with WEFE smart irrigation, 40 to 70% of the water use is more efficiently used. Now let's move on to another example without going into more details, and that has to do with urban settings, with buildings. Now, because of climate change, we will have a need for more space cooling, that's to say air conditioning. That leads to more energy use. This has to be addressed. The added water demand in hotter and hotter cities will need additional unconventional water. Again, using desalination as a source means enhanced energy need. The need for water-saving measures is prevalent, and we have to make sure that more recycling of used water is being done. Because of climate change and also because of deteriorating air quality, this will lead to deteriorating indoor air quality. And one way of dealing with this is to employ heat recovery and filtration in buildings. Finally, we need more energy efficient buildings. This can be achieved through improved insulation and in general through sustainable building materials. So again, I've come up with a whole bunch of effects, of primary effects, and have looked at the different commodities that are affected in conventional buildings versus WEFE smart sustainable buildings. And again, we have the sort of same story, and it might look a bit prejudiced, but still, I think WEFE smart sustainable building offers a lot of positive effects and a lot of advantages, and we should all make sure that we make that they practice more of that. Now, let me conclude, and I think I'm doing fine with time. Again, I mentioned in the beginning, we will have to communicate our findings more efficiently to the media. And I'm not sure if my presentation does this by any means, but here are a few key points that I would like for you to take home, so to speak. Firstly, I hope I made clear that a Nexus approach is urgently needed to address current resource security challenges in the Mediterranean. Now, maintaining resource security, water, energy, food, in light of climate change has significant environmental implications. Therefore, we need to employ a holistic WEFE concept to address resource security and sustainable development. And I gave you two examples where I tried to illustrate the advantages such a concept will offer by looking at irrigation technologies and effective irrigation technologies and sustainable buildings as I say, examples for promising WEFE concepts. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for any questions. We're now at 11:30. My stopwatch is right, so we have time for questions if you like. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manfred. That was very informative. Thank you for this presentation. I think that set the context very well. And I'm going to try to give the floor back to Jihad if he's around, and so we can actually learn more about the work of UNEP-MAP to protect the water ecosystems.
Very much, and apologies to everyone attending. It was a power cut, actually, which is at the heart of the energy problem. It was an unfortunate metaphor for the kind of challenges we have as we envisage a response to the climate problem, and energy, as you know, is at the heart of the problem. So let me resume from where I stopped. I was describing a situation where beneath the postcard and the beauty of the Mediterranean that we all enjoy, there are scars, because the Mediterranean region is in the throes of this triple crisis of pollution, biodiversity decline, and climate change. The plight of coastal and marine ecosystems in particular is alarming. Let me give you some figures. It's an estimation, but it's a staggering 730 tons of plastic waste that arrive in the sea every day in the Mediterranean. In 2016, more than 220,000 people died prematurely due to air pollution. Experts have recorded that have recorded more than 1,000 non-indigenous species in the Mediterranean Sea. On the shores of the Mediterranean, crop productivity is expected to decrease by 20% by 2080 in this region. The Mediterranean is also a hotspot for climate change, warming 20% faster than the global average. Natural ecosystems have complex interactions with the climate system in ways that science is helping us to understand, thanks to the work of the IPCC, IPBES, and also the Mediterranean network of climate change experts, which I will talk about later. But before I venture into that, let me offer some background. This region, the Mediterranean region, is well equipped for a regionally coordinated action to address the triple environmental crisis. The UNEP Mediterranean Action Plan, MAP of the UN Environment Programme, is a regional cooperation platform established in 1975 as the first regional action plan under the UNEP Regional Seas Programme. The adoption in 1976, so 45 years ago, of the Convention for the Protection of the Marine Environment in the Coastal Region of the Mediterranean, known as the Barcelona Convention, was one of the early achievements of UNEP-MAP. The UNEP-MAP Barcelona Convention system constitutes a comprehensive institutional, legal, and implementation framework that 21 Mediterranean countries, coastal countries, and the European Union, also known as the contracting parties, have adopted for concerted action to fulfill the vision of healthy Mediterranean Sea and a healthy coast that underpins sustainable development in the region. In 2020, as Mediterranean countries were grappling with the first waves of COVID-19, two seminal reports backed by the UNEP-MAP Barcelona Convention system shed new light on the hefty toll that the triple crisis that I mentioned earlier, pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss. So these reports shed light on the hefty toll that this crisis is taking on the Mediterranean. The two reports I'm referring to are the State of the Environment and Development in the Mediterranean. Many of you would have seen the slides that colleagues pulled up earlier, and the first Mediterranean Assessment Report on Climate and Environmental Change by MEDEC. It's an independent network of scientists that specialize in the study of climate and environmental change in the Mediterranean. So these reports show just how vulnerable Mediterranean ecosystems and communities are to the combined pressure from key economic sectors that are at the heart of the blue economy and beyond, and climate change. So we are vulnerable to impacts of our own making from these economic sectors, but also from climate change, which is bringing a whole new wave of impacts. That's because the well-being and resilience of human societies, as you are aware, are linked to the health of the natural systems that underpin them. Hence the notion of One Health, or the One Health approach. So the State of the Environment and Development in the Mediterranean report warns that the Mediterranean is not on track to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. This has been compounded by the pandemic and its impacts on the economy, as you are aware. Rising inequality, biodiversity loss, the growing impact of climate change, and unrelenting pressure on ecosystems can lead to irreversible environmental damage in the basin. Unless urgent and resolute action, degradation could have serious and lasting consequences for livelihoods in the region. So it's that serious. The report need to bolster the region's resilience. The first Mediterranean assessment report by MEDEC, the Network of Mediterranean Experts on Climate and Environmental Change, which is co-sponsored by UNEP-MAP and the UFM, among other partners, has established the facts of the unfolding climate crisis in the basin. The peer-reviewed findings point to far-reaching impacts affecting both natural and socio-economic systems. The science encapsulated in these twin reports, as I like to call them, SOED, so the State of the Environment and Development in the Mediterranean, and MAR1, the first Mediterranean assessment report, these twin reports confirm the urgency of a post-COVID green recovery in the Mediterranean. This would entail diverting current trajectories towards more sustainable and resilient paths. Since the spring of 2020, UNEP-MAP Barcelona Convention Secretariat set about supporting a green recovery from the COVID-19 crisis by, first of all, ensuring that the COVID-induced disruptions do not result in eroding hard-won gains under the Barcelona Convention and its protocols. Second, by advocating for practical ways in which Mediterranean countries can recover in a more sustainable and resilient fashion. The recovery offers an opportunity to boost enforcement and compliance of the Barcelona Convention and its protocols. This is the region's best chance to rescue Mediterranean ecosystems from their predicament. This is in line with the recently published report by UNEP titled Making Peace with Nature. The full implementation of obligations by the contracting parties, i.e. coastal countries in the Mediterranean and the EU, and the participation of stakeholders, including the media, civil society organizations, businesses, informed citizens, constitute crucial building blocks for a green recovery. We also need to encourage private sector engagement and mobilizing green investments, including investments into a sustainable blue economy in the Mediterranean. Of course, the onus is in primis on decision makers at the national level to acknowledge the irrefutable evidence that science brings. It is no longer possible to maintain current trajectories. We are on a collision course with nature. In theory, all the ingredients of a green renaissance, as I like to call it, or green recovery in broad terms, all the ingredients are in place, in theory. The science has spoken. Several Mediterranean countries are situated at the cutting edge of green technology. Some of them, of course, not all. Financial flows are pumping, and regional solidarity is increasingly, despite the challenges, is increasingly visible on the agenda. Paying what is called the green premium, so the cost of the transformative changes needed in sectors such as tourism, agriculture, industry, and transport. Paying that green premium will be offset by the significant benefits in public health and in healthier and therefore more productive ecosystems. We owe to our beloved Mediterranean a swifter, more resolute action. Environmental multilateralism has never been more important, not just for the success of the UNEP-MAP Barcelona Convention system, but also for the future of our region, but mainly for the future of our region. This is not about institutions, this is about the Mediterranean region's future. For the Barcelona Convention, the Convention for the Protection of the Marine Environment in the Coastal Region of the Mediterranean, for this convention is a regional public good from which all Mediterranean countries, all Mediterranean citizens stand to benefit. No country, organization, or actor does not have a stake in the full implementation of this convention and its protocols. The 22nd meeting of the contracting parties of the Barcelona Convention, which is scheduled to take place from the 7th to the 10th of December, so basically in a week from now in Antalya, Turkey, will be a new push for effective multilateralism and coordinated action among Mediterranean countries in the European Union. Making peace with nature in the Mediterranean and bolstering our collective resilience to climate change must recognize the ocean climate biodiversity nexus in the Mediterranean context. In practical terms, this means mainstreaming marine and coastal ecosystems-based adaptation and mitigation in nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plans by the Mediterranean countries. It's important also to mainstream mitigation adaptation into marine spatial planning and integrated coastal zone management. These are technical terms basically, but I just want you to know that there are instruments, there are tools already in place that we can benefit from to move in a swifter fashion to more effective adaptation, to increasing resilience, but also to contribute to the mitigation effort. So the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention system, and maybe I'll close by this, provides a framework for region-specific climate action. We have the Mediterranean Strategy for Sustainable Development. This is a strategy that was devised and introduced and adopted by the contracting parties under the Barcelona Convention. Also, a regional climate change adaptation framework for marine and coastal areas was also adopted by the contracting parties. We have, since 2008, an integrated coastal zone management protocol, which is specifically targeting coastal areas and the protection of coastal areas, including bolstering their resilience. And we also have projects, different projects, pilot projects that are supposed to show the way through expanding bright spots and success stories and showing the way on how we can increase resilience and improve our ability to adapt, but also to participate in the mitigation effort. Part of the complexity of reporting on climate change stems from the inherent complexity and intertwined nature of the process, biophysical and socioeconomic processes involved. In my view, recognizing the ocean climate biodiversity nexus at the global and regional level translates into addressing the crucial interconnections among water, energy, food, and ecosystems, the so-called WEFE Nexus. So sustainable consumption and production and the promotion of circular approaches are essential in this respect. Sustainable consumption and production and the promotion of circular approaches are part of the mandate of the UNEP Barcelona Convention system through the work of its Barcelona-based Regional Activity Center, SCPRAC. The complexity of climate change can be daunting to the layperson and can seem remote and distant from the concerns of citizens suffering from the economic hardship wrought by the pandemic. The challenge, our challenge as communicators and as, I suppose, journalists and media professionals is to get the right message, the accurate message across, and to ensure that citizens are well informed about what we want to collectively achieve through a green recovery. The media and the institutions working for a better future in this region share an interest in ensuring that citizens understand what making peace with nature, what it means, what it truly means, including by promoting nature-based solutions, explaining what they are, as the best way of protecting ourselves from the impacts of the climate crisis. We need your help, of course, in getting that message across. And I thank you for your attention. And again, I apologize for the power cut and the disruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihed. We have a question from the audience from YouTube, and actually it's asking, Surup is asking from what will be the future of southern countries who are most affected by climate change in comparison with northern countries? Maybe you can answer from a governance perspective or regarding policies.
I'm sorry, Patricia, is that question addressed to me?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yes, it's a good question because climate change or the climate problem is does not affect all countries and all regions in the same way. Some countries are affected more than others because of their biophysical situation, because of their geographical location, because of their inherent vulnerabilities. So it's important to take that in. Under the UNEP MAP Barcelona Convention, there is a principle of solidarity, which means that all the contracting parties of the Barcelona Convention can come together, pour over issues, discuss issues, and present the facts of phenomena like climate change. This, of course, will include scientific facts on what's happening, but also other elements like how they are impacted by climate. The main instrument remains, of course, the Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, but under the Barcelona Convention, as I explained, there are instruments that can help those countries that are most affected by climate change to better adapt and to better increase their resilience. Of course, these instruments are to be taken as part of a global or a wider endeavor to increase that resilience because of the scale, the global scale of climate change. So what I would conclude by saying that we have a number of tools and instruments that can be used to help those countries. but these need to be complemented, of course, by other global elements and global tools and instruments, especially those that are under discussion or that were adopted under the UNFCCC, the Global Convention on Climate Change.
Thank you, Jihed. Manfred, would you like to say something in response to this question?
Just a few words. I mean, I think what you had already said is pretty comprehensive. One thing I would like to stress is that, in my view, in the southern countries, adaptation is actually more important than mitigation. That's not to say that mitigation should be sort of taken second stage, but I think in terms of causes of climate change, the Mediterranean countries do not play such a major role as other countries. However, as she had already pointed out, given the severity of climate change in the region, adapting to its consequences will become more important. And I gave examples in terms of irrigation and of built environment. There are many other things. And I think what people in the South, in my experience, could learn, for instance, would really be to adopt more of sustainable building technologies and building approaches. Because, as we all know, urbanization in the Mediterranean is very high already. Therefore, a lot of the effects will be felt in cities and quite severely so. And that's why I think cities have to be transformed to some extent to be more resilient to climate change impacts through various measures. Green roofs is one thing. There's so-called cool pavement that doesn't absorb as much heat as regular pavements, and so forth and so on. So my view again is that what can be learned and what should be practiced in the South are more effective adaptation strategies in various sectors and in everyday life. Thanks.
Thank you both. I think this gave a really good background to jump into the more media-oriented part of the session today, which is actually delving into the barriers and how we can communicate more effectively about these challenges that we are facing, no? And trying to deep dive into the interconnections that we briefly discussed between water, energy, food, and ecosystems, given the rapid urbanization and the major transformation that we need to see in the coming decade. So I will give the floor to Marta Castillo, who will be moderating the next session.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you all for joining today. I hope you grasp a bit the idea of that technical and research background of what's the WEFE Nexus and what we will be discussing now. I have a very nice panel today here with me. I have four women that will be discussing. We will be discussing together for the next, let's say, 45 minutes more or less, how to better report from a journalistic perspective what we have been discussing so far. So how to better report this complexity of climate change, focusing on the Mediterranean region. So I have with me Chantal Mena, I have Liz Mouvet, I have Aida Delpue, and Dania Almami joining from all over the region. So I don't know if you want to say a few words of who you are, and then we can jump into the discussion. So you can introduce a bit yourself and say where are you based, so we understand which representation we have here today. So who wants to start?
Sure, I can start like last time.
Okay.
My name is Lise. I'm a French journalist, and I'm based in Amman since 2 years. So my focus is Syria and Jordan, and I try to cover environmental issues in the region. So yeah, mostly Syria and Jordan. I write in French and English, and use Arabic in my work just to do interviews and things like that. And, it's nice to see you here.
Thank you for joining, Liz. So we can go to Chantal, maybe?
Yes, let's keep going with the French in the room. So I'm Chantal, I'm based in Barcelona. And we have a beautiful sunny day to celebrate the Mediterranean today. It's cold, but it's very, very sunny with this beautiful sky that I think we all like. So I'm a communications expert. I've worked for 15 years as a communications manager with WEFE Mediterranean, covering all the topics from sustainable tourism to fisheries to cork forests. I mean, I think I've touched upon all the biomes that make the region so rich in terms of environment and human features. And I'm now a consultant, and I work with a number of organizations in the region still. And I'm very happy to be with you all today.
Thank you, Chantal. So we can go to Aida.
Yes, hello.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me today. So I'm Aida. I'm a French and Tunisian journalist. I work for the independent online media called Intifada. And so I'm currently based in Tunis, where we are actually having our first real winter day today. So it's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's getting colder. So we can welcome Dania, last but not least.
Hello. Hello, Marta. Hello, everyone. This is Dania. I am Jordanian. I'm member and member at EquiYouth Jordan and the Geologist. It's an environmental platform interested in environmental issues. Nice to meet you all and see you here.
Thank you, Dania, and thank you all. So I will stay with Liz and with Aida for this first question. So for the audience to know, I will just be moderating the session. So I will be asking questions to some of the panelists, and we will build a discussion around that. But feel free to drop any questions in the chat or on social media if you have any for the panelists, and we will just pass the question to them. So I will start with Liz and with Aida, asking them a bit from the journalist perspective, which are the barriers that they find when reporting about climate change, always focusing in the MENA region because it's where you are working. So which are, what do you think that could be improved or could be changed for you to make climate reporting easier? I don't know who wants to start.
To change.
Maybe Aida, yeah. Sure.
So I would first talk about a challenge, maybe not a barrier. That is the one of having a local impact about the issues that we cover. So I mostly cover environmental issues, not specifically climate change, but pollution, the loss of ecosystems, agriculture, energy, and all their social impacts as well. And I find that one of the difficulty I have is actually to first bring those themes related to environment into the daily discussion. So this is one of the first challenges, like having actually an impact, and also having an impact on a structural and more official level. How can we influence and also bring a voice into the policymaking at a local scale? And this is also something I find very difficult to actually reach to the ones who make decisions, because it is something to report on these topics, to unravel and bring up environmental scandals, such as pollution. I've worked on the pollution of the sea in the suburbs of Tunis, for example, and there is a huge problem here. But there has been no reaction, no official reaction concerning the revelations. So yeah, I would say there is a very big challenge there. and also the challenge of accessing data, but I think we'll talk about it more later.
Yes, we will discuss, I think, a bit more on deep about that. Yes, so we can give the word to Liz, and then we can build on your answer, Aida.
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges to just working in the MENA region as a journalist and as a foreign journalist and as a freelancer, and some of them are specific to climate change or to environmental issues. Some of them aren't, so lack of data we'll talk about, it's a big issue. Lack of access to public records and to public officials as well, just as a foreigner sometimes, but also as just an independent journalist. If you don't have an organization backing you, it's hard to get answers from people or to even get their contact and get in touch with the people that can answer your question. About climate and environment specifically, I find that there's really a lack of space in international media and in local media for the issues that I want to cover, because some newspapers, well, they will be asking for topics that are very news related or that are related to something current happening. So during COP26 you'll have a lot of opportunities to pitch environmental stories because it's trending, but then the rest of the year or in later times you won't find this space at all, especially for certain countries like Syria, where you have a lot of other things going on, and so there's already so much space taken up by political issues, and even that space is shrinking. So international media talks less and less about Syria or about certain countries in the Middle East, so they're not going to prioritize stories about the environment often. There's also the issue definitely of having an impact and reaching the right audiences, because there are local journalists who work on environmental issues, and but there are few of them. There are also some foreigners, and of course for me it's a big concern that I'm not writing in Arabic. So whatever I write is going to reach maybe policymakers and NGOs, but not necessarily local audiences, and I think they are definitely a priority. But there are ways to get around that we can talk about later, of course.
Yeah, I see. I mean, that's what I would like to maybe dig more in this first question, because I think there is a difference between what Aida and you were saying. Like, Aida was more concerned about reaching the policymakers, about reaching those that take the decisions. But
yeah,
I mean, what is it? Yeah, like it's a huge difference, and it's a challenge, I guess, to reach policymakers. But maybe it's even a bigger challenge to reach the general public, let's say, like the audience, right, the citizens that can also push for that change,
And I think I can't speak for the whole Mediterranean, but in Jordan, from what I've seen, definitely there is a lower level of knowledge about environmental issues, or people might have a lot of they might be very interested in environmental issues, but they don't call them that way, or they're not going to see what you're looking for when you're doing your report. So you have to be a bit creative about how you're going to approach local people to get your information from them about things that they don't necessarily see as environmental issues. And then when I write an article, I know that, if it's in English or in French, maybe people in NGOs and, regional level policymakers will read it, and maybe they will, I don't know, find it interesting. Most likely local audiences are not going to do that because they don't necessarily read in English or in French. So you have to work with local journalists if I want to have an impact among a local audience. And it's not just about language, but it's about the way of presenting the issues. That, in a French newspaper, some issues about plastic waste, for example, it's very Western audiences are already very familiar with it. But in Jordan, every time I go to a supermarket, I have to explain why I don't want a plastic bag. So if I write an article about plastic waste, I already have to go through find a way to make it appealing to the audience and to show why it's an issue, because it's just different priorities and different things that people are interested in.
Yeah. What do you think, Aida? Like, do you see that difference as well?
I totally agree with what Liz is saying. It is hard also, to find how to bring up these issues. And so one of the solutions I have found is to tackle actually this kind of issue through the social angle or the sanitary angle, because this is what, people are concerned about. So, for example, the water scarcity, well, it affects directly agriculturists, but so starting by this and the social impacts of this scarcity, and then bringing up the broader picture of climate change, of policies, as Manfred has said. I think 80% of the water in the Mediterranean is used by agriculture. So yeah, about reaching the official and policymakers, it is also difficult to do some confrontation, and this is absolutely what we need when we do a journalistic work. Is that first? Well, I mean, of course, we accuse some people of a bad. I mean, of a bad behavior and so we need to confront these institutions, the people who are responsible for the situation, and it is very difficult to reach out to them. And I will also talk about language because it's very interesting and very important, and actually it is also a challenge. Speaking for me, I write in French. But I can also write in English. But in my media, what we do is that we translate everything. So all our publications are in French, English, and Arabic. And each time there is an original publication, it is automatically translated into the 2 other languages. So this is a way we have found to address the challenge of language, because actually even in Tunisia, where people speak French, but I mean, it is not a majority of people, the articles that actually have the most impact are the ones in Arabic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's different situation with languages across the region. But I would say, the difficulty of Arabic, English, French, it's also another challenge that makes the communication even more difficult.
It's not just an issue for your audiences, but it's also, even as a journalist, I used to work for a Syrian media where I was one of the only Westerners, and most of my colleagues were Syrian and did not speak English. They had really good access with sources on the ground, but when it came to sometimes you need the only way to access data about environmental data about Syria is through reports from NGOs or UN bodies, and these reports are not always translated. So that's where it's really important to have these collaborations. I think it's super interesting to work with a journalist that doesn't speak your language or speaks another language in addition to yours, and working in pairs on certain issues, it really makes it richer because you have access to different sources. And so they would ask me to do the boring work of reading the report, and they would do more of the interviews.
Yeah, but in the end, the result it's better than if you were doing it separately now. So that's what's matters. So yeah, I will keep on going. I will pass to the next question, and I will bring Chantal into the conversation now. So I would like to get her perspective, like not so journalist perspective, but more from a communicator, like from an organization, let's say, like a more communications side. What do you think, Chantal? Like, how could we make more accessible and impactful the communication around climate change in the Mediterranean? I mean, I think you have a bit of experience on that. So what do you think about how to make it more accessible for people?
Thank you, Marta. So first, I think we are extremely lucky as communicators. We are in one of the most challenging regions on the planet, which is often referred to as a laboratory, because it gathers so many different social, environmental, and economic aspects that can be actually seen at the global level in a small area. I think that we're lucky also because it's a time for us really to question it as communicators. I've been working on environmental issues for many years, and it was, I wouldn't say easier, but I think the challenge was a little bit easier before. You had a project, you could talk about it, communicate about it. We knew the situation wasn't so good, but now it's really worked. And I think we've reached a point of no return where we really need to act now. And what makes it challenging is that...
Chantal, I think very badly, actually. Like, I don't know if the audience can, but I can see you quite blurred, and the connection, like the voice, it's not clear. So I will ask you if you can check your connection, and I come back to you, because it's not very. Maybe you can try. Maybe yes, I don't know, or check your connection. I don't know if your Wi-Fi or, but it's not very not very clear.
5G.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back in a minute.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, technical problems, a lot of them today. So maybe we can keep on going with Dania. So I include another actor in the conversation. So I wanted to ask you, Dania, because you are more focused on youth and more like grassroots organization and movement. Like, what's the role of this youth movement and organizations as the one you are involved to raise awareness on climate change and its impact? Let's say, like, what can you make to make the people aware of what's the impact in their daily life?
Okay, Martin. I think every one of us can reduce or help to limit climate change impacts, and they take care of our planet. Our role as a youth or as a group organization to promoting the awareness by environmental education or climate education, to empowering youth, today's youth, to meet tomorrow challenges. Also, I think we need to mention a scientific research and evidence. Also discuss every person that fight climate change and dialogues. Finally, I would love to say we have to create an art climate change and hang up posters or mural in every visible spot in cities, such as the universities and the schools.
So you think art is it's also a good way to raise awareness about these topics, like not so
it's
classic
a
journalistic
way.
reporting, but more different ways of communicating. Yeah, that's a good point to add.
Yes, I think
we
it's
have
more effective and more creative.
Yes, definitely. It's more complicated, but yeah, it can be more effective if you do it, like if you find the good way of doing it, no, like the right topic and the right approach. I think we have Chantal back. Let's see if we can hear you and see you well now, Chantal.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes, I think now
good.
It's fine.
Sorry about this. I don't know what's happening.
It's fine. So yeah, we can go back to the question, Chantal. I don't know where we stopped, but we were talking a bit about how to make that communication about climate change more impactful, but from the organization perspective.
Yes. So what I was saying as an introduction is that for sure we are in a very challenging time. And we're in a challenging time because I think that we are in such a level of the crisis that the way we talk about the issue, and especially the issue of climate change, through reports and a number of scientific information and numbers, of course, is important. But people are like in an existential crisis. And this is surely true for everyone, but this is all the more true in the Mediterranean, where on top of everything you have quite a difficult geopolitical situation, social crisis that is looming, and an economic situation that is also changing a lot. And I think this really makes it challenging because now we're in a phase in our lives where it's about giving a meaning, to the resources that surround us and how we're going to use them and how we are using them and how it's also questioning our ways of living every single day. So it can no longer be science and decision makers and trying to figure out how they're going to solve it. It's an issue that is touching every single person in our daily lives, and it's really asking us to check our ways of living every single day versus what we're going to be or where we're going to be in the next 10 years. And it's extremely difficult when you have a situation in most of the Mediterranean where daily lives are about surviving, So I think we have to be very, very much aware of this. I think, however, that we have a great opportunity because the Mediterranean is the place that has always been seen as a laboratory. It's a place where you find the characteristics of the entire planet, especially at the sea level. But I think even at the society level, you have so many different cultures living together that I think we on a smaller scale, can start transforming things. And as far as communication is concerned, I think more than ever, we are needing to be more creative. And I've been into environmental communications for enough time now, especially in big organizations. And what I see is that we really need to get out of the typical, launching of a report, commenting, organizing events, and so on. We really need now to reach out to people, and we need to reach out to people, even not to convince them. Most of the time, I think it's really to inform them. And I think it's a time when we need on the one hand to be super creative, and on the other hand, we need to have enough modesty to say we need to be humble and go back to the basics. Because putting salt in your food or opening the tap every single day is already a gesture you make for the environment. And I'm pretty sure that a good amount of people in the region do not know where the salt is coming from. You have salt, you need to have the marshes, you need to have coastal wetlands, you need to have, all these different habitats. To have water, it doesn't come from the, it's not magic. So I think
it's not coming from the tap directly.
No. And it might sound very naive what I'm saying, but I really think we shouldn't be afraid of going back to these basics, and not going back to these basics in a way that is putting people in a situation where there is a catastrophe looming, so you should be careful, and moralizing people, I would say. I don't think this is the way. I think we need to look at a way to communicate that is much more solution oriented. Mm-hmm. And it's also considering, of course, all the water, energy, food, and ecosystems. But I think we need also to consider we live in a system where everything has to deal with money and the economy. And I know it's very challenging to talk about, paying people for their behavior if they are positive to the environment and so on. But we might need to start looking at these things. So that's a lot of things to consider. That's a lot of challenges for us communicators. But I think it's at the same time, it's very exciting. And I like to hear that art should be more present, because I think there's a nice connection to create with this. Yes. And art in the sense of, what is easily accessible to people, even in the streets. I also think we have a huge young generation in the region. And I think this is an incredible capital we need to build on and support and encourage, because they're extremely creative and willing to change things. So it's definitely an audience that most of us haven't been talking to. And if we talk about decision makers and politicians, because we need also to, of course, continue to involve them, from my experience, it's really about taking them to the ground, take them to the field, show them what the reality of people is. And I work a lot with Brussels-based people and in the commission, and they always say it's so important for us to hear the stories from the ground. So I really think that it's not easy, but I think at the same time it's extremely interesting because we are going to be forced to get out of our comfort zone as communicators. Yes. And it's extremely interesting. I think if we are up for the challenge, I can only see a lot of opportunities opening, actually.
I would like to, I mean, everything you're saying, it's very interesting, Chantal, and I think it's a good linkage with what Dania just mentioned before you, like the role of youth and how other ways of communicating, like other channels or other, like not only focusing on these reports, as you said, or like we do the presentation and that's it, but thinking beyond and going to other channels or other ways of communication to make that message reach the people. I think it's very interesting. Before continuing, I don't know if Liz or Ida, they have something to add on that, because I guess they have something to add on that because it's really their topic. So I will give the floor to Ida first, then we go to Liz.
Yeah, so to follow what Chantal has just said about, being creative in the way that we bring up the climate issue and all the environmental issues, I may insist a bit about data. This is what we are doing a lot at Intifada, actually, and this is why it is also very hard for us as journalists to find the data. But so we think that one of the best way also, to bring some awareness is actually to give the numbers to people, the facts. And so, I mean, we use a lot the infographics, for example, or data visualization. So in my media, we have a whole part of the team that actually are web developers and graphic designers, but that work hand in hand with the journalists, to think of some final visualization. So I think this is a good way also, to bring in a different way the same information, actually, but instead of very long reports that very few people read, bringing this information that way.
Yeah, but
and if I may
go
also
ahead, Chantal. Yes.
Now, just also to build on this, it's extremely interesting to see how people react to climate events. Let's say there's a sort of reluctancy to consider that this could continue happening. There are lots of studies that are showing this. People live a moment when there is a climate event where they are, of course, in a huge stress, but then they discover that they're building their own resilience. It's also a time usually when people start to help each other a lot. So there is a sort of something happening at the society level. But then once everything is finished, we start over again as before, and we're like, okay, we don't want to hear about this. And I think it's going to be also an important challenge for all of us, from communicators to journalists, to look into the psychology of people, because I think it's a reaction from our oldest brain. The danger is here, we run away. So I think it's really also about studying the way the mentalities are working, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's a bit what we are seeing with the pandemic, no? Like we thought it will change our minds, like we will change our behaviors, and we can see that, I mean, as soon as we can go back to our normal life, like we keep on doing what we were doing before. So yeah, maybe we need to learn better, like how our minds work to be able to communicate better. I will pass the floor to Liz, because I think she also had something to add.
Well, I don't have much to add, but I just wanted to say that I mean, for me, I like to think of my sources and the organizations, the local grassroots organizations, the people on the ground, people like like Eco Youth, for example, in Jordan, as it's a two-way communication channel. It's not just you going to interview people and getting information from them, but it's also important to share back with the sources and also using social media. It's a good way to gather information sometimes, to find people who are going to be speaking for you, who are going to be sharing their experiences with you. And it's also a place where you can kind of relay messages, that articles and findings and things like that. So not just thinking of extracting information from the ground, but also really building a two-way network with your sources and the organizations that are active there.
Yeah, so they are a good tool to get the message through as well, no? I guess.
And if I may add something,
yes.
So just to follow the idea that Lisa said, also it's important, I think, to update so the articles that we publish, and also to go back, for example, when we report on a certain community, I like also to go back a few months later and to see if things have changed, to stay in touch with the people I've interviewed, to remind also the policymakers. So actually it's not just about writing a piece and then going to another one, but it's actually keeping it alive until something happens.
Yeah, I think this goes very in line with, what I'm sure you have discussed and you have talked about that, but like doing this like more personal stories, let's say, that in the end, these personal stories are the ones that reach better the audience because they can relate. It's a bit what Chantal was mentioning, like letting the people know where the salt in their kitchen is coming from. Like it's something that it's in your everyday life. We are not talking about COP26 where all these people high level is discussing about things, but more your daily life stories. And also I think it's what you're mentioning is it's a very nice way of like keeping the people engaged and saying like, okay, this is how things can evolve for good or for bad, like depending, hopefully for good. But if we don't act, that's what can happen, after only 6 months maybe, or only 1 year. Yeah, I think it's very interesting this that you are mentioned, Aida. I think we can go to the data issue, because I think it's something that you both have mentioned. That I don't know if, Liz, you also feel that lack of access to data as a big barrier, but you were talking also more about maybe not data as figures, but more like access to information. No, let's say, like, which barriers do you find, and then we can develop from there.
Probably Aida uses, like, we have a different thing in mind when we say data, and Aida probably is more data oriented than I am. But just speaking from my experience, when I try to cover any topic, especially about Syria in particular, after 10 years of war, and there's no centralized administration collecting any information, where are you going to find data about, where are you going to find reliable figures, where are you going to find reports that cover the whole country? Sometimes you find information about one part of the country. So it means you have to kind of fragment the way you're working or compile data from different sources. Most of it is unreliable. None of the data that the government provides can be relied on, basically. So there are ways to get around this. There are international organizations or regional organizations that are publishing reports, and they have, there's a lot of humanitarian data, for example. Not a lot of environmental data, unfortunately. So you kind of have to find ways to make up for the lack of official numbers and of systematic production of data, either by relying on whatever local grassroots organizations are doing, which is often going to be on a small scale, or relying on regional organizations or NGOs. But again, it's unlikely to be environment oriented. A lot of the things are more about the humanitarian crisis. So it's very difficult to just, a lot of the time you're speaking from people's impressions and testimonies, but it's very difficult to actually assess, the extent of a problem because you don't have figures. And another way that people are getting around this is through remote sensing. So you have some organizations now monitoring water levels or deforestation, or, how small oil refineries are polluting certain parts of Syria, for example. So you find ways to get around it, but it's never perfect. And then even in a more peaceful context like Jordan, I find it also difficult to access data for different reasons, just because often it's not publicly available. You have to pay for it. It's paywalled, or it's, again, it's not always the most reliable, basically. So I'd be interested to know how Ada also gets around these struggles.
Well, I don't sometimes. But so, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, we are a lot data oriented. I mean, we like to bring up stories, always start from the people, and then broaden the frame and actually bring also the numbers in the same paper. So Liz, you've talked about many challenges. First of all, yeah, what you said about the fragmentation of data, it is very hard actually to find some homogeneous data. It can be about anything, like the agricultural surface of Tunisia, for example, or the number of wildfires per year since 1950. I mean, these are examples. But so first, this data is hard to find because the Tunisian administration that holds this data has a kind of tendency of withholding the information. I mean, the arguments, there are many arguments that they bring up, like this is top secret data, or so actually it is very hard to find basic information that can be a ground base for your work. And then also sometimes the data actually doesn't exist or hasn't been collected or hasn't been updated. So I mean, there is no I see no sense of using, for example, data that has been censored in the early 20,000, so 2000, sorry. So yeah, there is this issue, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, do you see somehow like how it could be improved, like looking from a more, I mean, of course it's a general problem, but focusing on the climate change and environmental topics, like how do you think it could be improved? Like which solutions do you see to the problem?
So I think it's a whole culture of withholding data. So I think that first of all, we should those who are holding this data should get used to journalists asking for them and see them as a normal thing. And also Lise has said that some data, I mean, we make us pay for some data, which is also the case in Tunisia. For example, yeah, if you want data about climate, for instance, you'll have to pay for it. So maybe just try by, keep on asking this data to try to change actually this culture of withholding the data. And then what I do is that I actually go and reach out to academics. So people who work in universities who actually have this data. And so this is the shortcut I use often to access this. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Liz, if you have anything to add. If not,
no, I don't. Yeah.
I will include Chantal in this conversation because I guess, I mean, she's a bit on the other side, let's say. She's a bit on the organization side where you go to find some data sometimes, no? Like she's been working on that side. So I guess, Chantal, you can give us like some, I mean, your perspective on this. I mean, what do you think about this lack of data that they are mentioning and how we could improve it? Like how we could work to.
No, it's definitely an issue. It's an issue because I mean, of the difference, let's say, between even the northern and the southern Mediterranean, and even the eastern Mediterranean, to be able to collect the data with the same criteria, which allows for comparison and looking at a regional scale, because that's the challenge in the Mediterranean. You cannot act on a single place. So you need to really make sure you collect the data for all the places. And I think it's an issue also at the level of training of journalists, because not all media or not all journalists have the capacity or the training to be able to look for data and to work on such data, because it's not always easy to understand. I see, and I'm also part of these organizations who work to connect more and more data journalism experts with journalists in the region. I mean, you might, I don't know, at the end of the webinar, talk about this this event we are organizing in 2 weeks. I don't want to be taking all the floor here, self-promoting, let's say. But if you think it's interesting for the audience, feel free to promote it.
Sure.
And I think it's it's an issue not only at the data level, but also at the level of working together as journalists, because now more and more you need to combine the pure scientific data with the economic data, with a number of other issues, and it means that journalists also have to move to a new way of working, which is building the news together. It's not 100% environment, 100% economy, 100% whatever, so it's clearly an issue. I mean, I don't have the magic answer to this. All I can say is that organizations are more and more trying to get the support of data experts to also go and work with journalists and allow for more training about this data journalism aspect, which is quite new. And at the same time, there's an effort also to translate the data into something easier to understand. I think infographics have allowed for huge progress in that direction. But again, I mean, numbers are important, but I really think that it's going to be about people, about content, in a sense of what is your daily life about. And I saw a question passed that was about what do I see
there is
as
a question here,
as a good example. So I don't know if I can share my screen.
Yes,
but I'm going to
should
send
be
you a
able.
link, and maybe you want to share it. I'm just showing the result of a Google search. And I don't know if you remember this campaign.
I've seen it here in Barcelona.
Me too. I think it's extremely brilliant because it doesn't cost a lot.
If we can, you can keep on going, Chantal.
Yeah.
So I will see if we can share the image.
I mean, there are many images. That's why I didn't know which one to choose. But it's basically about showing people that even when you walk in the city, the water is running through pipes under your feet, basically, and you should be careful to what you throw when you are even in the street, And I like it because it gives enough space for people to start thinking about it. You can read this in many different ways. It's not moralizing. It's just about, that you should be aware of this. Did you manage to share it?
Yeah, I just shared it. I guess you saw it.
Okay, well, I
hope you saw it. We can put it in the chat as well of YouTube. But yeah, definitely, that's a good example of like public awareness, no?
I mean, it's easy. It's easy.
It's a very
it's
easy.
And it's touching people. I mean, to me, this is a nice combination. Of course, then people need to know about the numbers, the problem, and how to have a solution to this. But to me, this was an example that is interesting to start talking about garbage, and it's not about stop throwing the garbage. Make sure you put this and that here and there. It's about if you want to enjoy the sea next summer, this is where it starts. And you're like,
you don't throw, yeah, it would be the same for, I mean, the water we are just using at home. Like, I mean, it should get into our minds. Like anything that we are throwing there, it's ending in the sea, unfortunately, at some point. So we need to be careful. Yes, I don't know, Dania or Aida or Liz, if you have like some good example of any, like, I mean, any campaign or any article, as Aida was mentioning before, like that you think could be a good practice, let's say, of what you think it's what should be done. Like it's more impactful. I don't know. I think Dania has nothing to say. Maybe Aida. Do you have something to share, Aida?
I mean, I can just repeat what I've said before.
I mean, no, if you have any link, maybe, or like any article, any report that you think.
No, currently really I can think of any.
Okay. Now, because you were mentioning before, like this article where you went back to the source and like you I mean, you tried to check, how the situation evolved, and because I thought that was a good example, of what can be done to raise awareness and to see, like to follow the story of someone. And
I mean, the update is not directly made in the article, but as we share it, we reshare it with some new information. So yeah, it gives a kind of timeline also. And, some people are just interested in knowing how the situation for this community has evolved. So sometimes it has not, and so we don't share it, obviously. But when it has, in a good or in a bad way, then yeah, we reshare the article with some new insights. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's just a good practice that I think it can be easily applied in the journalistic reporting. Yeah, so we have your comment, Dania, made some impact and about art, and we have some people in the audience that they were saying that it was very very interesting what you said about the art and the culture approach. And they were talking about an example, of how they manage, to communicate about environmental topics from an artistic perspective. But I think maybe it's. I mean, in the end, what Chantal, like that campaign you were showing, it's a bit art. Like, I mean, it depends how we want to describe, and how we want to define art. But I don't know what you think. But for me, that campaign can be considered an artistic campaign, very easy, and that can really change the way we see things. So just writing some things in the street, or just making these small posters, as Daniel was saying.
Yes.
Like
we can also draw. Yes, we can also draw a mural in a street in the city to increase the awareness of people about this topic.
Yeah, I think it's very small actions that in the end they can really. It's putting the people together with the data that we have been mentioned that it's so important. But in the end, like putting like who is the people behind that data, who is the people that is like suffering from all those droughts or like shortages on water. Like in the end, it's putting those things together and making it get to the people. So I think we are almost out of time. I don't know if any of you has any final remarks, any final comments that you would like to make. Any best practice, any thing that stayed there and you didn't have time to share. We can just share it now. I don't know if you can just raise your hand if so I can see if you have anything to add. If not, yes. So Dania, I think she has something to add. Yes. So.
Yes, Marta. My final word is for the people who use media, that we need to use the social media platform in a suitable way and in the right way. We also have to use a specific hashtag tag for environment to reach to the target audience. And also we have to involve this audience with our environmental activity or any climate action, because if you tell me, I will forget, and if you show me, I will remember, and if you involve me, I will understand. And this is our target for the audience, to understand more about this. Finally, I would love to say, give the young people seat on the table, because they will play an important role in the next decades. It's important for stakeholders and leaders to encourage them, to encourage and support them to express themselves, participate in a global fighting against climate change.
Yes, I think it's
Thank
very
you.
important to have this space, and yeah, to be to see a bit this changing, no, of generation, and having some space for younger generations that in the end
Yes.
we are the ones that will stay here in
Yes.
some years. So for sure we should be making the change. I think Liz has also some last words to add. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to the issue of lack of space in media for environmental issues, especially in this region, because where sometimes you have international media that is interested in the region, but not necessarily in environmental issues because they don't see them as a priority yet. And then you have local media issue where it's not necessarily in the interest of the readership, so they don't spend a lot of money or space on the environmental section. And I think that there are solutions to this at the level of the journalist. So I think we can create, to a certain extent, our own space. So very concretely, when I was working with a local Syrian media, it's about not just proposing articles with an environmental focus, but sometimes you're writing an article about security or a military operation or something that does not seem directly related to the environment. And this is where the WEFE Nexus kind of comes into play. Where you have to have this reflex of talking beyond the immediate implication and beyond just, there was a bombing on this region and so many people died and so many houses were destroyed. But you also go to the next step and talk about how, people who are being displaced are going to lose their agricultural land, or talk about the effect on the harvest and on food security and things like that. So sometimes you don't have an opportunity to write about the environment, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't put an environmental focus or you shouldn't pay attention to these issues, because if you think about them and you convey this message in your articles, then other people will start to pick them up. And then at the level of I want to say at the level of the industry, I think that a lot of media, of independent media in the Middle East, is already they're struggling to survive financially. So a lot of them are relying on donors to sponsor some content that's about human rights or society topics and things like that. And that kind of approach can definitely help support environmental journalism, because until there is an audience, a local audience for this content in the Middle East, local media is not really going to pick it up significantly. So there is also a role to play for policymakers to support journalism. And it doesn't mean paying for communication articles, but it means creating programs, funding for local journals, like local newspapers, to have the space and to write about these topics. So
yes. Yeah, I think this is going back to what you mentioned at the beginning, a bit that gap between international reporting and local reporting.
Local reporting, yeah.
And how we see that this in the end it's also a barrier to make any change happen, because
you need to find someone to take your articles at the end of the day. There are a lot of topics I'm really excited about that I will not write about because no one's going to publish them. So
yes, sure. Space in the media, it's important. So I will just give a final word to Aida, and we'll leave it here.
So I just wanted to add also maybe concerning a way of making it easier for journalists to have an impact is also collaboration, and especially a transborder collaboration. I think that more and more topics are very, very strongly related, especially when it comes to environment. I mean, I can give an example last year, and it has been the main affair concerning the environment in Tunisia. There has been a huge scandal concerning the importation of plastic waste from Italy. And so I have conducted an investigation with an Italian journalist, and it has actually got quite a big impact in Italy and in Tunisia. So I think this is, and also it was very, very important for us to have to have each other, especially concerning, the dangers also. But so it's always good to be working, maybe not alone, and also it can bring more impact and more visibility. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, definitely. Also going back to what we mentioned at the beginning of the cooperation, and that I think it was Liz mentioned it at the beginning of, like cooperating and working in team, no, in working with other journalists from other regions, or I mean from other countries in the region, or from other backgrounds. So you can add the knowledge to yours, and build something more impactful and more complete, let's say, like with all the angles. So thank you so much to all of you. It's been a pleasure to have you all here today. And I mean, I hope for me we could have stayed here talking for another hour. I think it was a very interesting conversation, and we had so many other topics to touch that we didn't have, but we don't have more time, so we have to leave it here. Thank you all. Thank you for joining today and for following this event, and celebrating the Mediterranean Day with us here today online. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because we can have this big panel, but maybe one day we will do live events back. And I think my colleagues have been sharing in the chat, or they will do it now, like the links to sign the manifesto, in case you haven't seen it at the beginning. That the manifesto that we launched from the Amwash Alliance. And just register as members and be part of the community, so you can participate in the rest, the following events that we will be organizing. So thank you all, and I hope you have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.